This is a conversation between William Somdi and Thomas Pacchia, in Manhattan, New York. November 6, 2019.
So, Thomas, today we're gonna talk a little about that conversation, what is Bitcoin? And, we always have those conversations of how to look at this thing. Is it a currency? Is it, digital gold, digital currency? What is it? Is it a protocol? What is it? So why don't you start?
So I could start with my conclusion, which is it's money. It's money in a purely digital form. It's money as an internet protocol, which we haven't seen so much before.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot of things that we still need to figure out about how this thing is going to work and play out. I mean, we can use existing criteria, whether that's a legal criteria of what is a currency, or some sort of like plain language definition for what constitutes a currency for us today.
Yes.
And Bitcoin doesn't really satisfy the primary elements of what is a currency in today's society. So it's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account. Bitcoin, you can start to make the argument, and this is a popular argument or meme like across the Bitcoin space, that it is a store of value. You have lots of people saying that it's a hard money or sound money, whatever that means. But it's clearly not a unit of account. People are not really pricing things in Bitcoins or Satoshis. Enthusiasts try to force that,
of course.
And that's fine. And that's how you measure. That's how you measure the unit of account for the Bitcoin protocol. But that's not how somebody would price something as a unit of account. A means of exchange is also a difficult one. For very large cross-border transactions, Bitcoin is competitive. It's clearly competitive.
You mean competitive in terms of transaction price?
Transaction price and also the time to settlement is a big one. So you have settlement finality in, depending on your view of I guess the risks associated with, confirmations and how other individuals would view what is a final settled Bitcoin transaction. That's, we'll try and stay away from getting into the technical weeds too much, but that's 6 confirmations where you have 6 other, participants basically confirming that this is a valid transaction that has settled. So that is generally, it varies in time, but like within an hour you can have settlement finality under normal protocol circumstances for a Bitcoin transaction.
Yeah, but if we're both of us doing business in dollars and then during that time that transaction is done and we have a fluctuation in price in Bitcoin, so we'd have to argue how we settle that.
Right.
So I think those things make it like, okay.
So, but two parties can agree to transact using pretty much whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right? They could be barrels of oil.
Yes.
They could be paper that represents oil that you never have any intention of taking physical delivery of.
We agree.
So whether or not those two parties have the appropriate on and off ramps is almost outside the scope of whether or not Bitcoin could have that property of a currency. So we see people people trade Bitcoin, and Bitcoin gets transferred from one address to another all the time. Every 10 minutes, a new block is recording these transactions. So it is a medium of exchange for what is the difficult question.
But one thing I have is that I see that the community of people using Bitcoin, or you say the hardcore Bitcoin, they haven't put out a very simple understanding for everyone to understand why should I need it.
Yeah.
And again, I think unless this is settled, there is no even reason to look at it. Because it can still be that complicated thing that a few guys esoterically understand. But the concept is, why should I care what Bitcoin is, what it is? Why is it important for me to know? Should I buy? Should I not buy? And I think that's the type of things I would like to solve today. And the reason I'm talking to you is because I know you're very deep into that.
It's a casual Wednesday afternoon.
Exactly, and
and we'll solve the Bitcoin narrative in question.
And especially because Ray Dalio wrote what he wrote yesterday.
Yeah.
It was about time someone said it, but okay, I think people in the Bitcoin community have been saying that for how long?
It's been depending on who you talk to, the narratives change over time quite a bit. But I think we have that Bitcoin hodler thesis or Bitcoin hodler investor mentality has been ranting and raving or quietly accepting what Ray Dalio outlined in his blog post yesterday for at least a couple of years.
A couple of years saying that if you have negative interest rate, which means what?
Money is free and meaningless.
Exactly. It's like, this is very simple. We don't need to have seen financial math to understand that. Something that is paying me negative interest rate, that means I don't want it.
Right. Okay. But people do want it. They can still buy things because it is that medium of exchange. It's that unit of account. It has the other properties of a currency, and I think we're in a weird world where we'll see how much the store of value really matters.
Yes.
How much, faith in something how quickly faith in something that's been taken for granted for, a couple of generations can erode or collapse. If that
what is that?
That money is money.
Okay.
Grayscale, the providers of GBTC recently did a study, and I don't know what the control group or how many people were surveyed, but it was something like 30 to 40% still believe that the US dollar is backed by physical gold and that you can redeem it for physical gold. So there is a abstract, gross misunderstanding of the
what is money,
properties of money.
Yes.
That may be too complicated at this point.
Let's say it that way. So we know how it started, that it stopped being backed. Bretton Woods in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So after Bretton Woods, they say money doesn't need any backing in physical asset. Mm-hmm. But what's the backing? So the way I perceive this thing is the money of an ecosystem called that a nation state is reliable as long as its economical, political, and justice system is reliable. Because that means it's how highly probable will I do business within that ecosystem.
So the justice system's a really important thing that you said. Whether or not it could be
the rule of law.
The rule of law, whether or not it can enforce
contracts.
The contracts, social contracts, there whatever. Before Bretton Woods, the thing that really shook the gold standard was, World War I and World War II. And nation states being able to, default on their debt, I don't want to say without consequences. I mean, the money was destroyed because we were, in global warfare.
Yes.
But you basically had side deals that were like, screw these side debts. We need to get through this rough patch.
Yes.
And we'll figure it out on the other side.
Yes.
And, without going into World War II history too
exactly
deeply, there were lots of side deals. There were entire islands and countries transferred from one empire to a new empire that was in a better shape. There were sovereign bankruptcies. There was decades of rebuilding that went into it, and I don't know if anybody really considered the long-term consequences of what our new monetary system looked like, because in many ways there were much harder questions and harder projects that needed to be focused on. But from that period of time all the way up until Bretton Woods, we did I think move to a completely new technology. I view the U.S. dollar as it exists today to be a technological experiment in its own right. It's a purely economic one. It has benefited the United States and other countries exceptionally well. It hasn't been so kind to other areas of the world or other parts of the economy. And I think that there's a real concern that the social structure that supports this technology is ultimately corruptible, just like any other long-term social project ends up being.
Yeah, but the thing is, today we can argue that the justice system in the United States is one of the strongest ones.
In this country.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good.
Exactly. And that makes someone...
It's not perfect, but it's good.
Yes, it's better than...
It beats most of the alternatives.
Most of the alternatives. And which makes it a place where people want to do business, and because they want to do business there, they will need the currency to exchange within those limits of that ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons I always think that if Bitcoin needs to be claimed as a currency, it needs an ecosystem first. Because otherwise it's really hard to think. Because you have countries like that have incredible inflation, but to transact within those countries, you still need their money because they have an ecosystem. So because they have an ecosystem, they can establish what is the currency you need to transact. And
well, let's say you have like, you know, a food supply or critical medicine in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Let's say it's this. Let's for simplicity's sake, let's leave this all on the black market. Like not necessarily like bad guys, but people who are holding exceptionally valuable medicine.
Yes.
Are they taking bolivars for the medicine? Like it's.
We know they're not.
Right. They're not even really taking Bitcoin. I don't mean this to be like a pure Bitcoin argument.
But you know, to the question of why is Bitcoin something I should be interested in? You know, and what is the narrative for everyone to understand what Bitcoin is? And I personally couldn't settle on the currency one, but I think looking at Bitcoin as an hedge against the system going completely broke, you know? And you say, I've heard people tell me, I think everything is going to be destroyed, and so that's why I buy gold. Okay, and I say, okay, let's imagine the end of the world. You have $50,000 worth of gold, and you're walking around with it, trying to do transaction with the next big guy down the corner. How would that go?
Probably pretty difficult.
Probably pretty difficult. Or you may say, no.
Yeah.
Let's do this transaction and then we'll settle it where my gold is. Still in the same problem. But when I think of those scenarios, I see Bitcoin as something everybody will always take. Because it's from wallet to wallet. You can hold an enormous amount of it in very high denomination or just millions of it, which is a Satoshi. And you can transfer wherever you want. And you can be walking around and nobody knows. So for those people, I'm not saying I believe in the end of the world, I don't believe in the end of systems or everything, but if we would say, let me look for an edge, that's where I believe Bitcoin is a smarter edge, a smarter hedge against the system than gold.
Yeah, I think so. And for a number of reasons, I think it's good emergency money. It would be an exceptionally shitty apocalypse money because you're still going to need electricity and the internet and for people to want to keep the lights on. And but it's good future. It's a good future money in that. One thing that you left out, it does have those comparisons to gold, and it is, you don't have issues like custody, cost of carry, cost of transfer. It's heavy, it's cumbersome, it's not terribly easily divisible, but gold is, relatively easy to counterfeit, and we've had a lot of issues with that recently where, there's been gold bars that are certified from Credit Suisse or somebody, or PAMP, another big miner, that's inserting, iron bars.
No way.
Yeah, of course. So, you have to basically melt it down or have special equipment to know that it's, it is what the other party says it is.
Oh my God.
With the Bitcoin network, one of the main properties is it's not viable to counterfeit Bitcoin. You can't inject new Bitcoin into the system based on how the verification process works.
You can do a fork, but
if nobody respects your fork, you have useless money.
Yeah.
You have, I mean, unless you have, well, I mean, there's been plenty of forks that are useless and still valuable.
Yeah.
But you have, yeah, that's a different podcast, though. You have, the ability to run your own node and become a network participant, and by doing so, you can validate for yourself the authenticity of Bitcoin that you accept.
Yeah, but that would be for a player that wants to build something completely different, his own ecosystem and everything.
Yeah.
No, but we're talking in the reason why would someone buy gold? Everyone I've heard say they would buy gold is because they're afraid of inflation. That means money not being worth anything.
Yeah.
It's because they're afraid of the end of the world.
Yeah.
That's the apocalyptic vision.
Yeah.
And I say in both cases, I see Bitcoin as a better substitute than gold in that sense.
Potentially. It's going to have to walk a fine line between, good money in the system and bad money out of the system. So if Bitcoin becomes something that must be custodied at a bank or a financial institution and will have paper derivative products, that starts to look an awful lot like what happened to the gold market itself.
Yeah, but you don't need that.
You don't need that, but there is going to be an inherent fight. I mean, there are existential issues down the road if a new money starts to eat the existing money's pie.
Yes. Who's going to control it? That's what you mean.
Who's going to control it? How do nation states collect taxes? How do they preserve a powerful tax through seigniorage? Like, how do they continue to, feed the beast? I guess.
Yeah, but all those scenarios are scenarios where Bitcoin is widely adopted, no? Because to have a problem like that means Bitcoin is widely adopted.
Yeah, or it gets squashed ahead of time. I mean, there are. It's interesting to watch these debates play out. There are some people who see this, in every country on Earth, and I don't view Bitcoin as something that's inherently adversarial. I think that it's a new asset class and it has a lot of the same properties that gold has. It's just a better version of gold for modern society. Mm-hmm. But it does potentially threaten certain aspects of the economy.
How? I don't see it.
Well,
or at least what are the reasons someone might think so?
So one big push that I'd like to point to is there's a meme going around where these exchanges. Let me back up. Bitcoin exchanges have been centralized points of failure for quite some time.
Yes.
That's where...
When you say centralized point of failure, that means where the attack and hackers go and steal money from accounts.
Right. You rob the bank because the bank has money.
Exactly.
It's a good place to go to get a lot of it because,
exactly. You know where it is.
You know where it is. And, this is historically what has happened with Bitcoin exchanges. Yes. Mt. Gox being a big one. There was, one or two large attacks against Bitfinex. And just any exchange or any chief security officer at any of these exchanges will tell you that they're under attack every minute of every day.
Yes.
All custodial solutions, start knowing that if they are breached, it's not email addresses and phone numbers they're losing, it's actual money this time.
Actual value.
Right, which is terrifying because we know, there's just an endless list of incompetent companies like Equifax giving over what we thought was sensitive data, although it's not sensitive anymore because it's all ubiquitous at this point. It's out there. So with Bitcoin, the value attaches directly to the data itself. So when you have a centralized point of failure, a third party that is out there ready for attack, mm-hmm. then you're effectively creating just the new banking system that we'll have to operate with. So it's effectively the same situation that we had with central banks collecting gold and then printing paper to represent the gold. Eventually, what would be the point of moving the Bitcoin if it wasn't assumed to be secure?
So you were saying that at some point, maybe they start treating Bitcoin and monitor it the same way of someone telling you this is gold, someone telling you this is Bitcoin. And I was thinking, why is that necessary? Because the network in itself, the mining in itself, that's exactly what it does.
So if we're talking about like a tax, like mining works if it's like somewhat distributed. It creates confidence in the network so long as there's not a majority miner. The problem with majority miners is they so over 51%, or if you have a super majority like well beyond that, you will have the ability to censor transactions that are allowed by whatever system is controlling the majority of the mining, majority of the hash rate.
How probable is that?
It's happened once before.
Yeah.
In the early days.
Yes.
By a mining pool. It really shook confidence in the system. This was in, I don't even know, 2013 maybe.
Yeah.
2014, 2012, around there.
Mm-hmm.
What they did was they lost a lot of hash rate. So members of the pool started to leave and join other pools because this was something that would shake the confidence of the system. You could have reorg attacks, which means the miner could effectively reassign value of Bitcoin from one address to another, or you could prevent or allow transactions as you see fit through censorship.
That is if you control 51% of the mining power.
Right.
What is the biggest pool today?
Probably
how much today?
F2 pool. Well, it's hard to say because it varies. I think it's somewhere in like the 30% range last time I checked.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a lot known about these different pools and about the individual miners that are contributing to a pool.
Mm-hmm.
So there is always a concern that they are sort of in cahoots, and there could be a central organization that controls multiple pools and gives the appearance that there is decentralization of miners. We haven't had any immediately identifiable issues.
But I'm thinking about that. If you do that, and you control 51%, what you just did, you just destroyed the value of what you're holding. Because everybody just leave the network.
Right. So there is a balance of incentives where you stand to be far more profitable. You
by not doing
by
that.
Playing by the rules.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like those are the system that works because the moment you control it, everybody lives, so you didn't control anything.
Unless there's something more valuable at stake.
Like what?
Like taxes, like seigniorage, like an individual nation state to have their currency be a primary export of that country. It would be expensive, but relatively non-trivial for a large nation state to set up a mining organization, mining operation that could, meaningfully attack the network, especially in these early
attack
days.
To do what? I don't
Well, it would
understand.
be a 51% attack to censor transactions.
Okay, so let's say you're a nation
prevent
state.
transactions.
So you're a nation state. You control 51% of a network. That's the only value of the network that no one is controlling it. The moment you do that, you destroy the network. So that would be a nation state that wants to destroy it.
Yes, potentially, or control it, right? I mean, there could be, it could be a different nation state, right? So it's, easy to use examples because you have, a leader right now, obviously with the U.S. dollar, but Russia, China, whoever, doesn't like the status quo of the U.S. dollar being in control. So if they were to take over something like a Bitcoin, then use that against or as an alternative to the U.S. dollar's dominance in,
But again, let's go to that concept. So I see. Why is it all over Latin America or all over the world people want dollars? Because they trust the dollar.
Yeah.
So it's a question of trust.
Yes.
So you want to beat the US dollar, build an ecosystem that is more trustworthy.
Yes.
And
or
people-
removes trust from the equation. Or minimizes trust, I think would be more
Yeah, when you say
accurate.
minimize trust, you're saying
Minimizes
reduce
trust.
mistrust.
Reduce mistrust, or
Which is-
assuming bad actors, or self-interested actors.
Yes. No, that means if you want to be a competitor of an existing currency, you have to make me believe in your currency.
Yes.
And I have to trust it.
Yes.
So let's say an actor say the US dollar is predominant.
Yes.
Now I want to build a new one, which is Bitcoin, and I control Bitcoin. But the moment you control Bitcoin, you destroyed it because the trust is gone. I'm trying to understand why
people know.
Oh, you mean if people know?
People know, yes.
So you mean the way would be to control 51% and not let anyone know?
Right, through a variety of pools and mining operations that aggregate up to a single source. Or
so let's say you do that. What will you do? You will transfer all the money to you.
You don't have to necessarily transfer all the money. You would just gain the ability to censor transactions and to allow the transactions that to prevent the transactions that you don't want to occur from occurring.
How would you do that?
Erode trust. How would you do that?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on.
You do not put it on the blockchain.
Right. So you wouldn't include that in a block of transactions.
Exactly.
Correct. So you wouldn't broadcast a transfer. So when a miner wins a block, basically they have a set of unmined transactions, unvalidated transactions, invalidated transactions, not invalidated, but yet to be included in a block transaction.
But if you do that, you actually destroy the real value or the reason why I would want Bitcoin. So you see, I'm trying to see why would someone try to control something that is uncontrollable, because the moment you control it, no one wants it. Because you start censoring.
So these would be nation-state attacks.
Yes.
Or they could be attacks from another cryptocurrency, if they were to.
Exactly.
And this is something
because they
that
just want to destroy it.
They just want to destroy it.
Exactly.
They want the value to switch from one protocol to
another one.
Right.
That I can understand.
So these are some of the silly attacks that are being launched out of some of the Bitcoin forks.
Yes.
And they don't have any real viability because mining operations are so expensive that on the whole, miners will mine in good faith to recoup their sunk costs already. Exactly. So it's really a zero-sum game. This is very expensive stuff. So
right
you
now,
have to
I think in terms of trying to start a fork with Bitcoin, the core being so much adopted, you need so much money in marketing.
Right.
It's not even a technology issue. It's not even a mining issue. It's a question of you need to sell me why I would use something new against something that has been proven against attack for years.
Yeah. So this is actually, this was the latest wave of attacks, which started back in 2016, maybe a little bit earlier, but they came to fruition in 2016 through Bitcoin Cash and Bcash.
So you see those as attacks?
Those are, in a way, attacks. I mean, forks are in a way,
attacking the main.
We're gonna go in a different direction. We're gonna create something new. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of value.
Let's drain
to
liquidity. It's like let's try to drain liquidity from one pool to another one.
Yeah, I actually think that these projects, these experiments are valuable because you actually end up learning a lot more from a failed experiment than from something that works.
Yeah.
Like, how would you know that it's going to work and for how long?
Yeah.
So when these things fail and fail spectacularly, we actually learn a tremendous amount from them, which is why I really like these Bitcoin forks.
Yeah. But I know you. In your case, you have HODL Capital.
Yes.
So.
So HODL Capital is an investment company that's focused primarily on Bitcoin Core, BTC, whatever you want to call it, but on the concept, the set of principles that come together and form these types of networks.
Exactly.
There are other ones that have a similar approach, and they'll have kind of the same set of principles that make a big B Bitcoin, but what they don't have is kind of a network effect and a broad acceptance for what Bitcoin is.
You mean the forks?
Yeah, but going back to what you said about the marketing budget, when these adversarial hard forks or whatever you want to call them occurred, there were massive marketing budgets. There was a tremendous amount of value coming from the mining ecosystem in China, the dominant chip manufacturer and mining pool operator out of China, put a lot of support behind a fork, and that failed. And why did that fail is a really important question. And I don't think that there's been a lot of talk and there's been a lot of kind of like applause and cheerleading around it failing to keep up with the main chain, keep up with, Bitcoin proper.
Yeah.
But was it because of technical shortcomings? Was it because Bitcoin has already kind of entrenched itself as something that works?
Yeah, I think, the level of adoption that you have right now and the free marketing, at least everybody know what Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
Somehow, and when they ask them, it's something that goes up and then goes down.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's literally, at least they've heard of it. But I think those attacks, like you said it, and I was laughing earlier when you said that, because I know you. So at Huddle Capital, so you're long Bitcoin, you like Bitcoin, you're sitting on a bunch of them. So every time something else fails, give more value to what you have, which is the way to look at it. And we've been talking about that for the last, I don't know, 2 years
at least
2 years, and we've been very sharp about what it is. It's different for you what it is for me, you know, because for me I look at it as I can choose where to put my money in so many other things, including my company and things like that. So why would I put money in Bitcoin? Right. So I'll tell you the first time I did why I did it. So I think the first time I understood what Bitcoin is was 2014. And I was in Israel talking at the Bitcoin embassy, and someone explained it to me. And they explained colored coin, and then they explained the smart contract. And I said, oh my God, if smart contract is what I think it is, I have to have a piece of that somehow.
Yeah.
Because at some point, we will eliminate the need of trust to do business with anyone, anywhere, and the need of a trusting justice system.
Yeah.
And the way usually my brain works is the moment I have skin in the game, so I have a very hard reason to learn pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So when I got in, I thought I understood a lot. And then when I got in, I started asking more and more until the point I understand what it was. I say, at some point, this thing, because that's what it is for me even today, is just a replacement for gold in my portfolio. And all the technicality behind it, I know it just in case to know if someone is gonna attack my value. So the same way I understand when I hold dollars and the US government is lowering interest rate, how does that affect my money?
Right.
Because those also are attack on your currency.
Right.
So when that happens, and what do I need to do? Do I need to buy bond? Do I need to buy stocks? Do I need to keep my cash in other currency? Do I need to start selling, I don't know, options on my money? Things like that. So when I understand all the inner working of the network of Bitcoin, it's just to understand the system.
Right.
But it doesn't affect my decision of having it, because my decision of having it is just a hedge against if everything goes wrong.
Right.
And as you know, as a trader, if everybody believes it, when things start going wrong, what will happen?
Yeah.
They will make it go up.
Yeah.
And that's how hedges work.
Right.
Because people believe it is one.
That's memes are powerful.
Exactly.
The memes are effectively like modern social movements. And almost if they're 100% true or even 80% true is almost secondary to whether or not they're powerful and people believe them.
But that's the position I take from it.
Yeah.
And it's not and you know me, we're both entrepreneurs, so most of our energy and our asset and our value is in building our own companies.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, but if I fail, what do I do? So how do I hedge my position?
Right.
And that's the way I look at it. I say, look, I have this here, which is a hedge against if everything goes wrong at the global level.
Right.
Or if that perception starts to go up.
Right.
Because the moment that perception starts to go up, it's the same thing as if it's going to happen, because all the assets that are perceived as a hedge will start to go up as well.
Right.
So that's just the way I look at it. But there is an issue with negative interest rate, Because the moment you don't have, so I'll tell you my take on what's going on with negative interest rate. We talked about it last week.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to talk about it right now because based on that conversation, I had a few more ideas. So what does that mean? Let's say I have a company that is losing money and that company is looking for debt, for a loan to keep the company afloat.
Right.
Let's say it's a non-investment grade bond.
Right.
That means it's a company that is not doing that well and needs money to keep things running. So there is so much money floated in the system that people are lending. When you say people, let's say the system is lending to a company like that almost for free.
Right.
Okay? So there's two ways to look at that. One may say, from one point of the economy, imagine like the economy is like a balance. From one side, I have cash. And from the other side, I have production of the economy. If I have more cash than production of the economy, the value of money is less.
Right.
Because I have more cash chasing less interesting things.
Right.
When I have a lot of interesting things looking for money, the value of money is higher because there are better ideas, a lot of ideas competing to get money.
Yeah.
What we have today in the economy is we have very little good idea and a bunch of money.
Yes.
So most people are willing to give money to what appears as a good deal rather than a good deal because there aren't enough going around for the amount of money we have circulating.
Right.
So here goes the big debate. One debate might be, let's reduce the amount of money. Because if we reduce the amount of money, it will equate the real businesses out there that need money, and you will reestablish the value of money. But this comes at a cost because it will make a reduction in the economy. Because you will have less money circulating and all those companies that have been flooded with cash but are not profitable will start going down and the economy will have a consequence on it.
Right.
But what would be the logical solution? The logical solution would be, how can we create more good and sustainable ideas that need capital to actually grow? And as long as we don't solve that, which is the real root cause of the problem,
Right.
the only thing we can do is try to solve it with liquidity.
Right.
So we keep, like in intensive care, the economy still breathing.
Yep.
When we know, in the end, if we don't start seeing real business people with new idea massively floating the economy with ideas that are sustainable, money in itself will be questionable and the whole system might be questionable.
Sure.
Because I stopped trusting everything. And then you run again. Okay, so instead of a run from a bank, it's a run on the system. Because you say, you know what if everybody really show their numbers?
We've already had the run on the system, though.
What do you mean by that?
Pretty much
WeWork?
Huh?
WeWork?
I know. If you
Nah,
can't trust,
come on.
you can't trust Adam, who can you trust?
That's just one case.
No, all the newspapers, all the government institutions. I think some of the most highly respected institutions and sources for truth have been corroded more in the last 5 to 10 years than we've had a complete reset. And I think that we're left with a lot of really kind of dark and fearful outlooks. It's something a little bit nihilistic right now in terms of like what it's going to look like on the other side. I think we have some good solutions to it. I think that a lot of that doesn't mean that people are inherently like depressive or
Yes.
in this dark space, but
Yes.
I do think that we are left without our treasured institutions, like
Yes.
many of us.
I'll tell you what made me take this seriously. Brexit. Okay? Because the English people is paying an enormous economical price to do Brexit.
Right.
So what are they afraid of? What are they seeing? You know, and in my life, I've never seen anyone stupid. I've seen people smart, and I've seen people with different incentives.
Yeah.
I've never seen someone stupid. Even when you think they're stupid, when you start talking to that person, you start understanding their incentive, you say, actually, it's a very smart person, but probably maximizing the wrong incentives.
Yeah.
So when I look, what is it that the British government and all the people that voted for that are trying to protect themselves against? I think it's a failure of the system.
I think that the EU is a large, far-reaching project that has been very, very good to some people and some cultures and countries and economies, and has been an abject lie to others. It wasn't able to serve a unified product that coincided with the unified vision that they were putting
Oh, you mean the vision of what the EU
The vision of
be
the EU, of a unified Europe, is kind of like the meme, the social movement that really took hold, after, the Maastricht Treaty or, post-World War II. It made a hell of a lot of sense.
Yes.
These countries, after, 2 rounds of pure cataclysm, had more in common than they didn't.
Yes.
But as things progressed over the next, 50 years, 100 years, I'll call it 100 years, 50 years, I think that the reality of what the EU was able to accomplish and deliver was severely lacking what was promised in that vision for an extended period of time. And I think it benefited some countries exceptionally well, and those are the ones fighting really hard to keep it as a cohesive unit. But, there has been, it makes sense for the UK to distance themselves first because they're not Europe. They're not continental Europe. They have always been separate and distinct. At least they have always had that as part of their core
culture.
identity.
Exactly.
So seeing them pull away from it and seeing some of the countries on the periphery start to talk about it the same way, you see a lot of the countries around the periphery of the EU have much more of a hardline nationalist government take hold. And that is in direct conflict with the vision that I guess Europe has. I thought we were talking about Bitcoin.
Yes, but we are talking about Bitcoin.
We are talking about Bitcoin.
What we're saying is, why would I care about Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And the only reason I say I care about it is how many people perceive it as a hedge against the system is not believable anymore. And that's the only reason I can give myself whenever I looked at it.
One cool thing about Bitcoin is that it doesn't have an institution. It doesn't
need one.
It doesn't need one.
So there's nothing to be failing.
Yeah, a lot of people who are in favor of this like Web3 movement, point to these trust models. And, the first trust model is really peer-to-peer. I know you, I build a relationship, I trust you.
Yes.
The second one is the hierarchical one.
Yes.
I know that lots of people want to go to Harvard because it's old and they produce quality, well-educated, upstanding citizens for centuries, and they get lots of applications, and they only take the cream of the crop, which is always true forever. Except it's not true at all. But
it's not true at all.
You trust them to produce people who go to other institutions. They go to Morgan Stanley. They go to J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. They go to the best law firms. They get to go to the best companies. And there's a hierarchical trust model built into a peer-to-peer dynamic where you don't have to trust, you don't have to spend all the time to get to know the individual and understand their qualifications. Their qualifications are vouched for by another brand.
To the brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I buy Nike. I buy Nike because I know it's Nike.
Yeah.
And I buy Adidas, I buy Porsche.
Yeah.
So it's like we're saying the vetting builds the brand, and the brand, everybody associated with that brand gets some of that trust.
So this third trust model that's being pushed, I don't really think that it's a third model. I think that it actually just facilitates the peer-to-peer model a little bit more. It allows you to interact with other individuals or other entities on a bilateral basis because you can verify certain truths in the encounter. So
that's way complicated. I didn't understand anything you said. Can you say that another way?
Not sure I understood what I said.
Okay, that's cool.
No, it goes back to that concept of counterfeiting that we talked about before.
Yes.
You can verify
peer-to-peer. Is this true or not? I don't need a third party.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly the point. It's direct validation.
Right.
And talking about end of the world, I say, in prison, when you watch TV, what's the currency? What are people trading?
It's like cigarettes or drugs.
Cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or herring. When Charlie Shrem was in prison, he traded like a tinned fish or something. Canned herring.
And I keep going back, to that idea that you're trading cigarettes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, cigarettes have more value than money.
Yeah.
Inside prison.
Right.
Because no one will take your money.
Right.
Because they will ask you, why do I do with it?
Right.
There's nothing I can buy in here with it.
Right.
But I know what to do with my cigarettes because I go, this guy wants to smoke.
Right.
And that's the same thing I see as Bitcoin.
Right.
Compared to gold.
Right.
Because in the end of the world, why do I want Bitcoin? Because everybody will want it.
Everybody will want it.
It's simpler to transfer.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you believe that there is such a thing, that the system can really collapse. So that is for each person to decide how much they believe in that or not.
Yeah.
Assign a probability to that, and that's the hedge in your portfolio.
Yeah.
But for me, that's the vision I have with Bitcoin.
Yeah, if the system continues to operate the way that it currently operates, you get the benefits of censorship resistance, you get the benefit of being able to validate for yourself, hold for yourself, your own wealth. You have something that is not so tightly correlated with the existing financial system.
That's definitely a reason.
Really difficult to decide, you've done really well with Apple. It's time to take some profits out of Apple.
Yeah.
Where do you put it?
Yeah.
Do you just hold cash and they print more and more cash?
Oh, I know what I would do with that.
Put it into Bitcoin?
No, into Apple again.
Into cigarettes?
You know what I mean? What else would you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's nowhere to put it.
It's like when I'm telling a friend, look, like Berkshire has $128 billion in cash.
Yeah.
And this is one of the smartest investors around. What is he telling me?
He's made his entire fortune by having lots of cash when nobody else does.
Exactly, because he's saying this is too high.
Yeah.
So what else do you do? Buy Berkshire, because every dollar you give him, some of him is cash.
Yeah.
So when the downturn comes, because it will come, he will deploy it for you.
Right.
Again, that's a way to look at it. That's the way I look at the very, very simple things.
Right.
So I have a very complex problem, which is when do I trigger the market?
Right.
Okay, I just buy Berkshire,
right,
and he will take care of that.
Right.
So if the end of the world is coming, what do? I buy Bitcoin. How much do I believe? Well, based on that probability is how much Bitcoin I have in my portfolio.
I think
But I know
exactly
your case is not the same because you're running a hedge fund that is trading Bitcoin.
Sure. So
that
we
means
do
you're 100%.
We do for the fund, yes. I mean, if we were talking about portfolio management for like a family office, or
no, that's totally different.
That's different. But
exactly.
For the fund, our mandate is very squarely focused on Bitcoin and infrastructure projects that further secure or make the money better, faster, stronger.
Yes.
In our case, we love the stuff.
Yes.
But for somebody else, you're absolutely right. I think that this is a brand new technology. There are lots of ifs. I think for as much as we really like Bitcoin, we have probably the most pragmatic approach to what the existential threats are.
I would say something, because I like when you said, we're using the word technology, and we have to make the separation. So when we're talking about technology, when you say technology, you see money as technology, you see a contract as technology, you see all those things as technology.
Yeah.
And so I want to point that out, because it's like, we can say also, Bitcoin is just a new asset.
Yeah.
It's just a new asset class.
Yeah.
Because when you say a house is an asset based on the technology which is called private property.
Yeah.
that is the network that is guaranteeing that my house is my house and your house is yours.
Yeah.
That's the technology below it, which is called the rule of law, the Bill of Rights, and all those things that sustain private property and freedom on it.
Yep.
So the network of Bitcoin is actually the technology, like the justice system, sustaining the value of why a Bitcoin is yours and mine.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
It's a pretty dumb communication network that keeps track of the unit of account of Bitcoin moving from a Bitcoin address to another Bitcoin address, which, right now it's difficult. I balk at questions in terms of what is it, because in the broadest sense is that it's just money.
Yes.
It's a communication network that allows you to make statements to other people that respect the network. And for individuals that respect the network and want to hear these, statements of, transfer from one to another, then, eventually that can be something of value, and that's what we've seen.
Yeah. For now, what I will stay with?
Right.
Bitcoin is cigarettes if you want, or gold.
Can't smoke Bitcoin. Can't smoke Bitcoin. You don't get the properties of nicotine out of it.
Take care, brother.
Take care.
What follows is a more technical exchange William and Thomas had later.
I think people just stumble into things.
No, but what do you mean it's a form?
So it's like it's a place where things are said. So a Bitcoin transaction is, a couple of data points. It's, my public address holds an amount of Bitcoin.
Yes.
I want to send it to somebody else's public address. Mm-hmm. How much Bitcoin do I want to send? Say, all the Bitcoin. I have one Bitcoin in my public address. I have, your public address. So that's 3 data points.
Yeah.
Right? And then I need to sign it, basically. I need to have the authority to say something to the network. And why would they care, really? Network doesn't care about my public-private key pair per se. It cares about the chain of custody, how that Bitcoin came to find itself in my wallet. Yes. All that work's already been done up front, though. It's validated the last transaction. So now I have an unspent, transaction output, which is effectively I have a Bitcoin that I can send to somebody else at some point. So when I broadcast that transaction, I'm just saying to the network, give somebody else a UTXO.
Yes.
And it works differently. That's how it works in Bitcoin Core. It can work differently depending on the other implementations. We'll give a plug for LibBitcoin, which doesn't use a UTXO model. But effectively what you have is a mechanism for recording thoughts that are spoken to a community.
Yes, but again, I completely understand, but it's the same
statements.
Thing. It's the same thing as the internet.
Yes.
No, it's messages from one point to another.
Well, the messages on the internet are more of like requests, right? I'm looking for something, send that to me. Send me that information. Mm-hmm. This one is keeping track of, statements of a, finite amount of resources that are being sent from one to another, right? Mm-hmm. So that unit of account being Bitcoins, and to bootstrap the network, it had, it was, front loaded, where more were being released in the first 4 years than there were in the next 4, and so on and so forth, so that people congregate in that protocol,
so that was how it was adopted, because it was very...
Yeah, so that attracted people, and you have infrastructure of it. And why does that infrastructure matter? At the end of the day, this is just a new type of money. But how do you bootstrap a money? What does money look like in the communication era, in the internet era? It's just
a message.
A message.
Yes.
But what gives that message the properties of money is kind of the, I guess, interesting aspect of this. It's scarce,
really
it's finite. And it has that scarcity built into a number of properties.
But I don't understand the scarcity part. I don't understand. The value of a currency is not its scarcity, it's its trustworthiness. You understand? The value of an asset can be scarcity, but you need to have enough liquidity for the amount of transaction you need to do within an ecosystem. So scarcity in itself doesn't define a currency.
So those are two. I think those are two different. I think those are two different topics. The first one being, relating to scarcity. I think that the 21 million supply of Bitcoin that will ever exist is actually less important than block space scarcity. Mm-hmm. So every 10 minutes, there's a new block which references, previous transactions,
yes.
how those Bitcoin came to be, where they currently are, why that person is sending it somewhere else. That's what the blockchain keeps track of in roughly 10-minute increments. There's a new, page of the accountant's ledger that's appended to the end of that, and releases kind of new information of where these rights to say a thing to the network currently reside.
Mm-hmm.
That space is limited.
Scarcity.
That space is limited. Okay. So every 10 minutes, you can only have a certain amount of people who say a thing to the network.
Okay.
Everybody hears it,
yeah.
and that's how everybody stays current in that one conversation that's happening.
Okay.
On top of that, you have the concept of overall asset scarcity, the 21 million, but you have more of a temporal component of
yes.
scarcity through block space, which I think is an important part that sometimes gets overlooked.
And why is that valuable? Why does that help Bitcoin have value?
So that helps by really kind of incentivizing those that create the infrastructure for that forum. So, if you have lots of people that want to say a thing, then they want to, who wants it bad enough is going to be whoever attaches.
Is going to pay you more.
The transaction fee.
So their
Correct.
message goes first.
Yes.
But that money goes to the miners.
Yes. Yes.
So what is really meaning is, okay, so now I know what you're solving with that reasoning. So what you're solving with that reasoning is why would people keep doing it even when the 21 million is done?
Correct.
And that's a very interesting thing, because that's one of the reasons they say once the 21 million is done, there's no more incentive
Correct.
to keep the network going.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is because of that, the urgency, that limit will always create value for people holding the infrastructure.
Yes.
Because they will have a very different level of price in terms of how fast
yes.
you want your message to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the block subsidy, that amount of Bitcoin that gets released into circulation needs to be irrelevant to a certain extent,
mm-hmm.
because it goes away. We see it going away through kind of the inflation schedule of Bitcoin. We're coming up on another halving event,
yes.
and in an exceptionally mature
so when you say
market,
going away, so at some point you say they will push the limit from 21 million to more. Is that what you're saying, or
no?
Not?
Some people say that. I don't.
You don't. I don't agree with
that. That could be a way to. That sounds like more of what we currently have.
Yeah.
Like the ecosystem needs to test the concept of simply relying on transaction fees rather than this
exactly
false assumption that the block subsidy is why miners continue to.
What's the block subsidy?
So the block subsidy is the amount of Bitcoin that gets released into circulation every block.
Yes.
So in the first reward era, it was 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes.
Yes.
Then 25,
yes.
12 and a half,
yes.
625, so on and so forth.
Yes.
And it gets cut in half roughly
A friend of mine wrote a paper
years.
on that, saying that it's going to be the price to do the service.
Yes. It's a utility.
Yeah, the utility of it. That's why it will keep the network. It's the same thing as why do I pay my taxes?
So if you think
I pay my taxes living in the United States for the only reason of the services that are done, keeping record of my money, of my service, of this is mine, the property.
Best subway system in the world, best hospitals and schools. That's where all the taxes go.
Yeah, but also to keep the record of who owns what.
Yes.
So you can defend yourself. I mean, there's a justice system. It's really to make the contracts relevant.
Yes, agreed.
So it's totally logical. That's where it should go.
So those transaction fees kind of incentivize the kind of creation and continued maintenance of this forum for people to continue to transact.
Yes, that point makes it totally clear, because I've heard so many times people saying once you have 21 million, there's no more incentive to be there. I mean, I think that is underestimating the creativity of the human race. You know what I mean?
So if lots of people respect this, this place to communicate, transfer value,
they will pay a fee.
They will pay a fee.
And they will pay for speed.
Right.
Totally agree.
how badly you want to have that transaction, how quickly you need that transaction memorialized becomes an issue.
Exactly.
And then
of course,
we
for that to
open
make
up a
sense,
can of worms with what is and is not valid.
Yeah, and I ask myself also, just to make that network interesting, as people start paying more, I should get some dividend for holding my Bitcoin. So it's like the miners probably have an incentive, but they should be sharing. It's like if I'm holding a bunch of Bitcoin, it's like having a CD.
Yeah.
I should get some dividend based on the transaction fees that the people are paying. It doesn't have to be a lot.
The miners should pay us? Is that what you're saying?
Of course.
How so? I love the idea. Let's see it out.
Let's see it out. Because what I'm saying is, me holding Bitcoin makes it relevant for people to have transaction in that ecosystem. Okay? So one benefit is the price going up, of course. But also the miners have a free flow, constant free flow of that. So they should incentivize everyone else to keep the system going with them. And I think any miner that come with that type of dynamic, I don't know, it's like we're really thinking about it, because for this to be interesting, everybody has to win.
Right.
And the way to win only to price movement is not sustainable, because you do not control market movement. But you can control flows of feed paid and the distribution of how those fees are paid to keep the network more and more solid, because everybody has a stake to keep it solid, And I think those type of design makes sense.
People will use the money that's probably the cheapest to use for a certain circumstance.
Yes.
One of the reasons why Bitcoin hasn't taken hold in the US is because we have a pretty good system of credit cards with loyalty points, super convenient, pretty much everywhere has a point of sale that accepts it.
Yes.
You can just use your phone at this point for most of these things. I referenced this earlier, for large cross-border transactions, there's not many mechanisms. You use a network of correspondent banks to send US dollars, and that's pretty much it.
Yes.
You can put gold on a plane. I don't know. You can hide diamonds in
You can do diamond.
You can do diamonds.
The diamond is cool.
Those are worthless as
But
well.
Except that they're going down right now, and we'll see.
Can make it in a lab.
Exactly.
But this offers an alternative network to transfer value for that use case.
Western Union is just the banking system.
Western Union accesses that corresponding network, and they'll have basically, points of conversion where they'll pay out, cash. A lot of people use Western Union if they don't have access to that large banking network, because those bank accounts are very expensive.
Yes.
So for unbanked and underbanked individuals that can't access that network, then they'll go and use something that has, I guess, more ubiquitous, entry and exit points, and they pay a ridiculous ransom for that fee.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that point of why that network will still be around. And it will only be around as the incentive mechanism to keep everybody engaged in it start making sense for everyone more and more. But again, then you have, how do we make them happen? Because there is no central authority. How do we agree on those type of design? We'll see.
It's going to be interesting.
We'll see.
I think a lot of these things are going to take a very long time to play out. We have conceptually, I think the foundation conceptually is there.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to figure out if we have the right balance of incentives, or where the existential risks truly are. I think that we're getting good at identifying certain potential points of failure for Bitcoin. It's a situation where if you talk to some of the core developers.
Yes, you mean at the code level?
At the code level, if you talk to some of the core developers, I think they see problems everywhere, and they are less enthusiastic about the continued success than if you talk to somebody who's more of like a libertarian, Austrian economist.
Yeah.
everybody needs to remain, practical and, eyes wide open with, the development of this technology.
Yeah.
I think it's, got a lot of potential, but it's still extremely early.
Yeah. Okay.